Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Shonen and Chill, hosted by Zenrado and Oceans.
Hello.
Today, we're talking about, I guess this is called the Arrow grouping of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So we're following up the
Yeah,
last
the
special episode. Go ahead.
yeah the the Arrow Saga
Arrow Saga, that's what it is.
nested in between the Mask Saga and the What the Hell's Happening Saga. Uh, which I'm actually very interested to see what the saga will be called of parts 7, 8, 9 once part 9 comes out. Which I mean, I'd be very surprised if it didn't.
The
Like
Two
Araki has
Balls
hinted
Saga.
at the Jesus Saga.
I would totally read that. The Stone Mask Saga, the Arrow Saga, the Christ Saga.
The Arrow Saga, the Mask Saga, the Arrow Saga, the Bible. But okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
All right,
What
yeah.
are we talking about first?
So first, let's talk about part 4. Diamond is Unbreakable. The one of the bigger departures, I think, at least by that point in the series, from what it was doing, because it's the only one where there's really no journey. You're not really
Mm-hmm.
going anywhere. You're not like even part 1, which was pretty contained to like England, the English countryside, still
Mm-hmm.
had like locales and castles and set pieces and backdrops, and um, Morio Town was much more self-contained. You never really got that
Mm-hmm.
grand adventure kind of feel from it, which for me personally, that's a big thing for JoJo that I like a lot about it, like the dramatic set pieces and the Dio's castle and all that kind of stuff. But I ended up
Mm-hmm.
really liking Morio Town. It was something that I actually appreciated a lot
Mm-hmm.
going through part 4. I have a lot of personal foibles with part 4, mainly because I really love part 3 a lot, and a lot of people shit on part 3. But then the same people that shit on part 3 absolutely love part 4 when they're like almost identical in the issues that they deal with. So it's really annoying
Okay.
because like you always see, oh, it's Monster of the Week, and I'm like 90% of part 4 is Monster of the Week. Almost every
Mm-hmm.
bad guy in part 4 just shows up and loses, which is fine. I don't mind it. I don't really care about Monster of the Week in anime. Um, but a lot of people hated about part 3, but then praised part 4, and I'm like, what? Come on, just be consistent. I think it really comes down to the fact that people don't like part 3 Dio and they really like Kira because Kira slaps. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's easier to justify part 4 because you just really like Kira.
Yeah.
I feel like it really comes
Yeah.
down to that a lot.
I think part 4 feels very different also because you mentioned the journey. Like, part 4 is basically Araki trying out a new type of world building for him, where it's not like going from place to place and establishing every place as a separate set piece and then having the fight happen and then moving on, but instead essentially going like, okay, this is our stage. This is our one place where everything will happen, and you will get to know it piece by piece and build this sort of familial bond with it, right? Like by the time part 4 ends, you're pretty familiar with Morio Town as like just a place. You know the major landmarks. You have you know memories and experiences depending on the various things that happened, and that's a thing you can do in storytelling that can come out very well. I personally didn't get much out of it in part 4, to be completely honest. Like I get the appeal, but I'm not a big fan of mystery generally. Like mystery is kind of like comedy to me. It just doesn't hit most of the time. And B, as much as it's like all about making Morio Town feel like this, you know, magical haunted town that is so oh so interesting, I don't know, I found myself kind of bored most of the time. Like there are very few fights and very few events in part 4 that to me stand out as like incredibly memorable.
I definitely agree with that. Part 4 has a weird problem, I think, because I usually like mystery stuff to an extent.
Mhm.
I didn't love the one in part 4, and I think it's because so much of the mystery in part 4 is predicated on the cast just being really stupid. Like, there's absolutely no excuse that Kira should have gotten away ever, multiple times. So,
Uh-huh.
like, one, when Josuke is like, I'll send the hand back to Kira, and then we'll follow it. why didn't you just pull Kira back to the hand? We know you can do that. You did it with Okuyasu earlier in the same show. And then again, they bring Joseph purely to use Hermit Purple to figure out who Red Hot Chili Peppers' stand user is, and then he just like hangs out while they look for Kira in pictures, and never is like, let's use Hermit Purple. And just, I know that you can't do that because it breaks the story, but when so much of the story is predicated on your cast just not using their obvious abilities that they already had, it becomes kind of hard to make me buy into it. Like, every time I see Kira be like, I'm the luckiest man in the world, I'm like, you.
Yeah, like it's a weird thing because I mean Araki does that constantly in all parts, but I think in part 4 it's more apparent because there is sort of there's no forward momentum, right? Like basically the story kind of meanders with its Monster of the Week formula until Kira is introduced. Then you have a lot of urgency when Kira is around, and then it kind of goes back in that meandering phase while they try to figure out where Kira is. And because there is not this like force that's pulling them forward through the story, you have a lot of time to sit back and consider, why is Joseph just hanging around in a river? Like, hello? Why don't you use Hermit Purple? And I know that if you go digging enough, you can always find solutions to these problems in your mind and in your own interpretations of it. Like, the JoJo fandom has made it a sport to find various explanations for things that Araki wrote. And while I think generally that's great, and generally I'm full on board with it, part 4 is where my patience with that kind of runs out, generally. Which is a shame, because, like, I love Kira. I think he's such a cool villain, like, just conceptually. I straight up plagiarized him for a short story I wrote for a writing contest. By the way, exposed. So yeah,
Okay.
that's how much I like him.
Ocean's fraud. I hope the board of whoever supervised that contest is listening to this show.
It's okay. I run that contest now. Like, legitimately. So I'm good.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Fucking fraudster on my show.
Nepotism and fraudulent reign all exposed 11 minutes into the episode.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff about part 4 that I really like. I actually really like Josuke. He's a weird, like, you know, everyone loves to rank the JoJo's or whatever. He's a weird one for me. Because I think he has some of the best moments in the series, and I also think he has a lot of moments where I'm like, I don't care about you or what you're doing.
Yeah.
Less so than a lot of the other ones do. Like, I know a lot of people aren't huge on like Jotaro, but I tend to like him a lot. Ever since the anime comes out, it seems everybody loves Joseph, but you know, people tend to shit on Part 2's manga. So, but when it comes to JoJo's, they feel very consistent. Like, you know, Jonathan has like 3 character traits, and he milks the shit out of them the whole way through Phantom Blood. Josuke is, this sounds weird to say, but almost maybe like more complex in a kind of boring way. Because,
okay.
Yeah, right? Doesn't that sound weird to say? Like, I know that when Jotaro is on the screen, something fucking sick is about to happen, right? And with Josuke, it's either he's about to do the coolest shit I've ever seen in my entire life, or it's about to be a complete 45-minute waste of my time comedy segment where nothing happens. And so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I think he has some of the best moments in the series. Like, when he fights Yuya.
Yeah.
And Yuya's like, oh, I'm healed? And he's like, yeah, I healed you so I can kick the shit out of you. Like, that's one of the coolest things ever. Or, like, the paper guy, the guy who causes the fear, when he turns him into a book to just be a conscious book for eternity and suffer. I was like, dude, this character's so raw. But then you spend 3 episodes fucking around with that gremlin kid trying to get money. And I'm like,
oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I think Josuke is weird because he is so likable to me. He's such a kind and cool guy. But as a main character to follow through a story, I can't say I was super invested for a lot of it. And I think it just comes down to, I think part 4 banks a lot on you getting really invested in these friendships and relationships. And I don't even have like a good salient explanation for it. I just, something keeps me from really getting attached to the cast of Morio. it might be because a lot of them are not super interesting. Like there's Josuke, there's Okuyasu, there's Koichi, and that's kind of it. Like uh, all the others are kind of like whatever to me. Um, so yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, but I do agree. Josuke has some of the best moments, like when he disassembles the motorcycle to jump over the baby.
And then reassembles it to land and keep going. So good.
Yeah, like
So
what the
sick.
fuck?
Ah, it's so sick.
Yeah, and like also I like the entire thing about like the entire Arrow saga in a way develops the theme of family and community a lot. You know, part four starts it where you have this community of people coming together to take on the lone serial killer, and I like that Josuke sort of embodies that. You know, as the guy who puts people in touch, who pulls them together because he's just such a kind soul. Like I like that about him. I do think part five executes that theme a lot better, but then again, I am the part five man
Yeah,
in a
part
lot of
five.
ways.
The part five section of this is going to be juicy. Everybody who's listening, just hang on tight.
Yeah. Yeah. Um but yeah, aside from Josuke, like standout characters in part four are really kind of scarce to me. Like Koichi is cool because he's one of those examples in JoJo of a character having a very straightforward but enjoyable character progression. Because a lot of the time JoJo just has very static characters that, you know, are put into situations that tickle out the cool parts of their characters. Whereas Koichi is very much a shonen hero going through his journey, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I kind of have similar issues with the cast. I mean, there's no like lead JoJo that I dislike, so obviously, I like Josuke quite a bit. Okuyasu is very hit or miss for me.
mhm.
He certainly feel. I know that Jobro-esque characters tend to, or like the sidekick, they tend to not be that useful. It's just their role, probably until like some of them have their moments. Like Hermes gets to fight a little bit, Kakyoin gets to fight a little bit. Okuyasu is not one of those. He spends almost his entire existence being completely worthless. But he's likable. There's just something likable about his dopey persona. Um, I like Koichi. Rohan, I think, is only likable in any way because of how over the top like dickish he is. It's almost in like a
Oh,
Dio way, and like if he wasn't that, he would just be nothing.
okay. This is the part where we get clipped. Uh, I fucking loathe Rohan.
Oh, there it is. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I hate him. He is by like no joke by far my least favorite character in all of JoJo, for two reasons. He is nothing special, and two, he gets so much screen time and attention, especially post part four, in terms of like the Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe specials. Like, oh my god, shut up about this guy. He's
Yeah, I don't
not
really quite
that
get the
interesting.
obsession with him. I mean,
Well,
well, there's the whole Araki's avatar kind of thing,
yeah,
which,
exactly. Like Araki loves him and wants to write about him with fair, which you know, fair dues. But I, as a reader, get to then complain because, like, dear lord, he's not that interesting or cool. He's he's just a weird guy Araki made up. And he's made up quite a few weird guys, and most of them are more enjoyable than Rohan.
yeah, I mean, I
So
like
yeah,
Heaven's Door a lot. I like the not the complex. What am I trying to say? The concept of it. You know, where it
yeah,
turns you into a book and you can read about your life and stuff. And it's a little
yeah.
broken, but I like the idea of it. I don't know that Rohan is the character to be. I don't know. I don't dislike Rohan. I just don't love him. Um, eh.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was just when there was that period where of like a year where we were waiting on part five news, and there was just like Rohan OVAs being announced every month.
Well, yeah, that's where
I
the whole
don't
meme comes from, right? It's like, are they gonna announce part six? Nope, it's another Thus Spoke Rohan.
exactly like, oh my god, I've trained my eye rolling muscle so much for that. It's ugh. Like, and I get he has fans, and I get those OVAs are. I'm sure they're great. I've not watched them because I'm not touching Rohan material. Like, it's genuinely moved into a genuine distaste for the character, just because he is such a nothing character to me and gets so much exposure. And you know, you go online and say this, and people are like, "What do you mean? Rohan is great." And I'm like, What? No.
Yeah, I think Rohan is just sort of the kind of the meme-ish material character, like the same way that Dio is the worst, but he's likable because he's so comedic in
Hmm.
how shitty he is to everyone, right? Almost like Naoya,
Hmm.
like the same kind of thing. That like he's
Uh-huh.
likable because his dickishness is so over the top that it veers into comedic.
Hmm.
Rohan's kind of the same way for me. Whereas like I don't particularly like him, but I like when he does things because they're so shitty that they're funny.
Hmm.
But I don't think I could. Yeah, I actually haven't seen the OVAs either. Exposed fraud JoJo fans. Neither one of us have seen the Rohan OVAs. And I just don't think I'm interested enough in Rohan trying to carry a story, at least to me.
Yeah. Like honestly, the only time Rohan's character has worked for me is when him and Josuke are gambling and his house is on fire
Yes,
and he
that's the
pretty
best
much,
Rohan episode for sure.
yeah, where he's literally like, "No, I have my house being on fire doesn't matter. I have to figure out if Josuke's cheating." Like that's cool, but the thing is that's not really a Rohan moment. That's a Josuke and Rohan moment. So, yeah, like definitely not one of the standouts for me, or at least not for the right reasons. Speaking of standout, the stands in part 4 are actually really good. Like I
Yes, I
like most of
think
them.
part four is where he finally starts deciding that he can be a little bit more creative with stands. Because a lot of part
Hmm.
three stands were like, I punch. I punch with fire. I punch with sword. like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
other than like Hierophant Green, I think kind of started to veer into that territory a little bit, but not too much. A lot of part three was very much just like, my stand hits yours. Your stand hits mine back. And
Hmm.
part four started to get very interesting and fun with it. Like I love the fear stand, where if he
Hmm.
figures out your fear tell, he turns you into a piece of paper or whatever. Super
Hmm.
neat. Like I love that kind of stuff. But I think it doesn't veer too far out of it. Like one of my only complaints with part seven is that the stands
Hmm.
start getting really esoteric and weird in that. Like my stand is
Okay.
the ability to slide up a rope. I'm like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? And I think part
Okay.
four does a good job of having like fun, fancy powers while still keeping what I like about stands, which is like the funky punch ghosts.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Uh, yeah, no, I do get that, but also, uh, I don't know. To me, part 4 kind of presents the biggest break for Araki's formula in a lot of ways, and stands are no exception, right? Like I think the biggest change is that he looks at stands not anymore as like a tool for for like fighting, but as a like extension of a character's psychology first, and then he asks himself, how does this work as a fight, right? Like everyone's favorite example of that is the lock, right? Like a super
Mm-hmm.
shitty ability in a fight, but really powerful in in capitalism. Where it's just like, yeah, I want your house. Don't you feel guilty that you ran over my fake cat? Please give me your house. It's stuff like that that I think really distinguishes post part 4 from pre part 4 in terms of like the power system. But I agree with part 7. Some of the shit gets really weird. But at the same time, I don't know. Stands that are like mind-bendingly stupid are kind of part of JoJo to me.
Well, see, I
Like
don't
I
mind them
love.
being mind-bendingly stupid. I think for me, stands are very much like this is my stand, this thing that does this. And part seven kind of leans into the stands that are just your body has a superpower.
Mhm.
There's very few actual like there's D4C, Tusk, and then you get Ball Breaker right at the end that doesn't even get named in the thing.
Mhm.
But 90% of them are just like a guy has a superpower, you know?
Mhm.
Like Diho's stand is just that he turns into a fucking velociraptor, but there's not like an actual stand turning people into velociraptors. It's just kind of feels like almost a different power system that kept the same name because he is keeping the name consistent.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
no,
this is not
I
about
do
part
get
seven.
that. Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I don't want to veer too hard into that. We need more material when Shonen Jump takes breaks. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah,
But
part four's power system is good. I almost think that part five's, despite it being more what I like of JoJo's like stand power system, kind of is a little bit of a step backward. A little
mhm.
bit. just in
Okay.
terms of the creativity of it. Because part 5 stands feel very much like part 3's, where there's a lot of punchy boys, but the punchy boys are just more creative and interesting in part 5. Whereas part 4, there feels like a lot of people who have powers that are just completely not combat related at all, in any way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can make you hotter if you really want me to. Or my
Mhm.
little gross tomatoes can make your stomach stop hurting.
Oh my god. The Italian episode, in the anime specifically, is so funny to watch because I don't know if you've noticed it, but in all language versions that at least I've watched, they make it a point to give him a horrible Italian accent, including a Japanese original voiceover. Like you can hear the voice actor trying to pronounce Japanese with an Italian accent. It's really funny. So yeah, like it leads to some cool shit. Even though, like, as I said, overall, like every single incident is maybe not as memorable. Although I will say, I think pre-Kira, like pre-Kira reveal, has more interesting stand encounters than post-Kira. But the ones in post-Kira that are more interesting, they're really fucking good, like Highway Star and Yuya.
Yeah, the
So
problem with post Kira is, or post, I guess when they're looking, what do you call it? What's it called? Like when they're looking for Kosaku, whatever you call that section of
yeah,
the story. Um,
yeah.
that is even more monster of the week than part 3 was, because every chapter literally begins with his ghost dad saying, I must go create the Power Ranger monster for this chapter.
Hmm.
And boy, does he miss a lot. I mean, Rock, Paper, Scissors Kid is in that part, and that's like the worst one, maybe ever. Um,
Hmm.
the Tower, Superfly, I do not like that.
Yeah.
I've seen some people say it's actually good. I don't really agree. I don't like Superfly. Um, ugh. Josuke does some cool stuff in it. I think Josuke might carry part 4 a lot more for me than I'm willing to admit, because a lot of times Josuke does cool stuff and it's just the coolest shit. Like when he's fighting
Hmm.
Superfly and he punches the bolt and to repair it, to shoot it back at him when it was like, that shit's fucking cool. Uh,
Yeah.
Crazy
Yeah,
Diamond in
that's
general is
true.
one of my favorite stands. The way he uses it is really cool. But
Hmm.
I don't know. There's a lot of Kosaku stands that feel like a waste of time. Like Cheap
Yeah.
Trick is just, you could have written that. You could have written Rock Paper Scissors Kid out. You could have written Cheap Trick out. There's so many that just feel like they do nothing for me, other than the purpose of being like, here's another wacky thing that our boys did.
Yeah, like that's maybe my biggest single issue with part four is that the pace kind of fucks itself after Kira escapes in both versions, both the manga and the anime, because the anime did actually restructure it to be a bit more bearable. But still, like, we have this serial killer on the loose, and here I am watching Rohan crawl on his feet so that no one sees his back. Like, I I don't really want to see that. I would much rather go back to the Kira storyline. And I get that, a big part of that second section is developing that in the background, seeing how Kira fits into the new household and how that kid starts becoming suspicious of him. But at the same time, I don't know if that was worth it.
See, I think you could
Because,
have condensed that almost into just set, like maybe having portions of like, this sounds dumb to say because it feels like I'm cherry picking after the fact, but like the good stand fights could stay. And then also you could just
Mhm.
have stuff centered on Kira, right? Like, I don't think you really need to have. I know that Diamond is Unbreakable is old. Like, you could never get
Mhm.
away with doing like a My Villain Academia thing back then,
Yeah.
ever. That would be like, you can barely get away with it now. But like,
Mhm.
having stuff focused more on Kira instead of feeling like there was so much airtime fluff to justify including Kira without being like, we can't have chapters that Josuke isn't in,
Yeah.
would have made the pacing of it feel so much better. I think part 4, maybe of any part, drags the most
Yeah.
in a lot
Like
of
I
places.
think I think the easiest fix would have just been because for the second part of the story, Josuke and Gang's hijinks is the A plot, and Kira trying not to get found out is the B plot. I would just switch them. I would just say make the main focus Kira, and have Josuke's investigation be the background plot. Because one of the best parts about Kira's plotline in that half of the story is his fight against the cat plant thing, Stray Cat. Because like not because the fight is like all that interesting or because the cat is like oh my god, but because it's cool to see him sort of have to deal with people because he's very much a person who made sure to never have to interact with other humans in a close manner, and now he has a wife and a kid. I mean, not his wife, not his kid, but still. And so when when he instinctively saves the woman from the cat stand, he's like, wait, what? Why am I so worried about her? Like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Like, that's interesting and cool stuff, and I would have loved to see more of it instead of cheap trick. So yeah, that is
Yeah.
a big shame.
And that whole later portion, I think the pre-Kira reveal of part 4 is fine. I see people say that part 4 only gets good when Kira shows up, which I don't agree with
Hmm.
necessarily. I think Red Hot Chili Pepper is cool. Akira himself is kind of like whatever. Like, but the concept of the stand user that can go through the power system of the city and can just like threaten you from anywhere was really cool to me, because that was not
Hmm.
something that was too used in part 3. Really, every fight in part 3 was pretty self-contained. You found enemy,
Hmm.
struck each other with stands. So
Hmm.
the concept in part 4 of there being like this overarching stand user that could just get you wherever. I mean, they kind of just reused it for Kira afterward, but even Kira himself was like, he's not a threat if he's not right next to you, and Red Hot Chili Pepper was, so I thought that was cool. Um,
Hmm.
I would say it definitely picks up when Kira is introduced the first time. I thought the mystery part was really, really good actually before he became Kosaku.
Hmm.
Like when they found the button off his coat when he killed Shigechi, and Jotaro's like, I'm looking around for manufacturers to do that shit with, and like, oh, we found it. Oh, he's got a tank. Like, I thought that shit
Hmm.
was really good. And then he
Hmm.
becomes Kosaku, and it just kind of is like, we are looking for Kira. How are you doing that? Rohan is taking pictures of every single male in the entire town, and we're looking at anyone that seems vaguely shifty, and we have no leads other than that. It's like, okay. This is starting to feel less like a mystery and more just like we have to justify our existence of still being in these chapters while Kira's doing things
Hmm.
with the kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Although, yeah, no, I do. But now that you mention it, Jotaro maybe gets one of his best moments in part 4, which is saying a lot because he has a lot of cool moments throughout his tenure in JoJo. But his standoff against Kira after the sheer heart attack fight
Yes.
is so good.
That
Oh
is
my
one of the
god.
best JoJo moments maybe ever. When he's just covered in blood and he just, oh man, it's incredible.
Yeah, and I like I know it's a very like a crusty fan theory, but I actually do like the idea that Kira gives him Dio PTSD because he kills someone in the same way Kakin was killed, and he repeats Muda Muda a few times during his monologue, and I'm like, and he's blonde, and it's like maybe that's not what Araki intended, but it's cool, and it gives Jotaro some extra depth though. Pff, yoink, that's my headcanon now. So
The
yeah, like
beauty of
it's
headcanon.
yeah, like I just like I like Jotaro. Like it's one of the biggest revelations to me after I rewatched all of JoJo with my girlfriend. The Jotaro is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I love
He's
Jotaro. He gets a lot of flack online. I'm gonna
Mhm.
reference online a lot because it's the only reference I have really for the JoJo community at large. I try to stay out of too much of it, but I see a lot of people give him shit that he's like boring or he has no depth just because he's not very vocal, and especially
Yeah.
anime fans who come in after.
Battle Tendency.
Yes. Sorry, I was completely lost it there for a second. After coming
Hmm.
off of Joseph, who's like this boisterous, loud, frat fuckboy kind of guy,
Hmm.
and then you go to Jotaro, who's very quiet, and they're like, oh, the only reason anyone likes him is because he's like cool, and he is cool. But like, there's a lot more depth to Jotaro than people give him credit for.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
mean we're probably gonna talk about that in the next segment as well because I think Jotaro gets that end of a stick of the stick as well. Where like people compare him so much to like the flamboyance of Joseph that it ends up distorting the view of him. But
I
yeah, no, I
agree
definitely
a little
agree.
bit with Giorno. I think that probably comes a little bit from Josuke too, because Araki's whole thing is that when he makes a new JoJo, he tries to make them opposite some defining characteristic of the previous one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've noticed that when you get the JoJos who tend to be like more like solemn or somber, I don't know if that's the right word, but they're more reserved, like
Mm-hmm.
Jotaro and Giorno. You tend to almost always get unfavorable comparisons to their predecessor, and usually people tend to like the character archetype of like the quiet, cool, badass guy. So I don't know if it's just
Mm-hmm.
because of how crazy a series JoJo is that people look at someone like Joseph or Josuke and they're like, yes, this is the right energy for this series or what it is. I don't know, but it did strike me as a little weird.
Yeah, because honestly, out of the quiet and collected JoJos, the only one people generally love is Johnny, and that's because he's in part seven, which people have, sort of indoctrinated themselves into saying it's a complete masterpiece with no flaws. So, there I feel like there's a bit of internet herding going on. Because once we get to part seven, that's going to be a fun episode. Because I have
Yes.
some very spicy thoughts on it.
See, I love part 7 to death. So that's going to be a difficult episode for that's going to be the one that really tries the
The ship.
tries the fabric of Shonen and Chill.
But yeah, no, I think you're definitely right when it comes to that cycle of uh, calm, goofy protagonist. Like that's very much a thing now that you've said it. Um, but yeah, like I think the last thing I really want to mention about part four is that Shigechi, like the fucking gremlin kid, is the weirdest thing to me because I've rewatched part four a couple of times, and every single time I have the exact same experience with him, where I hate him every time he's on screen, and then he dies. I'm like, oh man, that shit kind of hurted though. Every time, like I know it's coming, and it doesn't make me like him more when he's alive, and it doesn't make me feel his death less. It's actually a really nicely constructed a narrative. Because, like, he's just a piece of shit kid. But then he dies, and you're like, oh shit, this was just a kid who wanted to protect his
Yeah,
parents. Like, ah.
all of any positive feelings I have toward Shigechi are entirely post death because I hate that character. Like, ugh, ugh. He drives me nuts. Just like every time, all the episodes with him in them, I'm like, I need these to be gone. I need to never see these again. And then he dies, and I'm like, no, not Gremlin Boy, my
Yeah.
favorite, no. And I don't know why they chose to only make him like wholesome. I guess that's not true. He has cute moments before that, but it's ruined by him being a little shit. But like
Hmm.
when he's just trying to protect his mom and dad, and then he gets blown up.
Well, I think it's the whole thing where, like, when he dies, it reminds us of how we were as kids, very simplistic and just kind of wanted to, live with our families and have a fun time. But beforehand, it reminds you of how kids are in general, which is little piece of shit gremlins that, get away from me.
Yeah, fair, fair enough.
Do you have anything else on part four? Because I think I'm all out. No, wait, I have one more thing. Killer Queen is so cool.
Yes, Killer Queen's one of the best stands. No contest. I can't. It's so good that he just uses it again in part
Yeah.
8.
Yeah, it's like in general, final villain stands in JoJo, Araki is not missed with those, I think ever. And Killer Queen is no exception. Such a cool power used in so many cool ways. And it's just, the whole thing of a serial killer is given the ability to kill without trace. It's like, that shit's raw. It's making my synapses fire. Let's go.
I also think that the final battle between Josuke and Kira is incredible.
Hmm.
Super good. I don't love a lot of part 4 fights, but that one is so good. Especially the moment where he finally gets like corners him in the courtyard. God,
Hmm.
that's a peak JoJo
Yeah.
moment. I think the whole finale is really good. I like the teamwork to stop him from triggering Bites the Dust the final time. I like
Hmm.
the little conclusion chapter is like really cute. It's one of the only
Hmm.
times that a JoJo part has like a cute little conclusion of just like
Hmm.
everyone's happy now except for Shigechi, you
Hmm.
know? I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think
Uh,
that's all I have for part 4, personally.
all right. So the verdict on part 4 is children are the spawn of the devil out of 10.
Deal. I like that.
Okay. Uh, so next up, peak fiction, zenith of media, hallmark of greatness within the artistic form, also known as Golden Wind.
I fucking love Golden Wind. Sorry if you were expecting us to fight. Sorry. Fucking
Yeah,
love Golden
Golden.
Wind.
Okay, I want to get it right out of the way. Giorno, goat. The finale, goat. The entire plot line, including Diavolo, goat. If you disagree with those things, not goat. There you go. That's it. That's my stance on part 5 abridged.
Yeah. Okay. Part 5 fucking hits the entire time.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it has any bad parts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the beginning is a little slow, like when Koichi's still there. I'm like, okay. But that's such an
Mm-hmm.
early setup bit that I don't mind. Um, really, like I think all JoJo parts kind of start out a little slow, so it really doesn't
Mm-hmm.
bother me because it's just kind of par for the course. As soon as like Bucciarati shows up, that shit is gas all the way through. There is
Yeah.
there is no objectively nothing wrong with Golden Wind, and if you disagree, you're a piece of shit.
No, okay. For me, there are two things I would change about part 5. One, when the gang comes together. In the story as it is now, they immediately embark on the Trish mission, right?
Hmm.
Like it's immediately let's become the capo and then be and then help Trish. I would love for that to be the second mission they go on, and for there to be a small mini arc for the gang to kind of introduce themselves in a sort of a quieter, more slower paced environment. Because I think the biggest issue I have with part 5 is it is so fast. We don't get to spend a lot of time with some of these characters, and goddamn, I love them so much. I would love to just see more of them. And my second change is kind of the same thing. Give me like an epilogue, like something that shows Giorno's ascension a bit more. Because I think one thing everyone mentions about part 5 and that I will agree on is that the ending, especially like the end part, is very abrupt. It's like 2 pages. Um, but yeah, that's it. Aside from that, I'm not changing a goddamn thing about this masterpiece. Like, holy shit. Are you kidding me? Pure gasolina from start to finish.
Absolutely, the whole time.
Yeah.
I really like the assassination squad, the Squadra. That whole part is
Hmm.
really cool. Um,
Hmm.
I do sort of the only complaint I think I really have um, is I really wish that when they had kind of broken away and abandoned the gang, that it didn't kind of just settle back into the same flow that it had before, because it really felt like, oh, we have to fight one of these assassins each time, and then they
Hmm.
get away, and then they're like, oh, we have to run away from all those assassins. That's the only part where I was like, eh. But the stand fights are so good, like every single one, that it never
Hmm.
dragged or felt clunky or bad to me. I think I like every single one. Like I
Yeah.
can't think of a single stand fight I don't like. I even like Black
Uh,
Sabbath.
yeah, Black Sabbath is raw. Like, honestly, the only one I think I'm not super hot on is Squalo and Tiziano, just because I hate the trope of like, oh, a character can only speak nonsense or can only mislead everyone else, and the others don't realize it. Because I feel like that often relies on making the supporting cast stupid, and it does a little bit here too. And in the anime, that episode also was the one where the animation kind of fell apart. But I feel like that's a very minor issue, all things considered, because yeah, most of the fights are just so good. And I do agree about the part with the formula that it sticks too close to it after the betrayal. Because also I think the bodyguard squad, the people that come after them after they've betrayed the gang, I think they're just infinitely less cool as characters than the Squadra because the Squadra has a sort of camaraderie between them, especially in the anime where they like gave them 3 or 4 extra scenes just to like make them more of a group, which I thought was so good. Like, oh my God, I love La Squadra. They are pretty much my favorite antagonist group in all of JoJo. And there's a lot of my favorites in part 5 of like just stuff. So you're gonna hear that a few more times.
Yeah, I love all of them. I see a lot of people complain that they're kind of useless except for Risotto, which I don't agree with. I think if anything, Risotto is probably a lot more useful than a character in his role would get to
Hmm.
be um,
Hmm.
normally in a JoJo story. Uh, I don't know, man. I think I just like everything about it. That's not a very good explanation. Um,
I know. Well, if you want a really good explanation for why part 5 is brilliant, boy, do I have the video for you.
haven't you gotten enough views on that already?
Oh, dude, it's almost about to hit 1 million. Like, I'm gonna cry so hard.
Oh man, that's amazing. Congratulations. Legitimately. No,
Uh,
no, no humor involved there. Legitimate. That's amazing.
oh, thank you. That was such a labor of love, I remember. Oh, I'm gonna be all Deku the day that shit hits 1 million. But yeah, no, like I think to repeat myself about things I've talked about a billion times over the last couple of years, but I think what makes part 5 so special to me is that it perfectly marries the JoJo bizarreness with like genuine artistic grandeur, where it's like, it's taking place in Italy and this hyper cultural marvel, where it's just like you have all these parallels of Dio's son, the son of God, and the devil, and all that coming together in like a story about community and family. But it's also JoJo, and the guy pisses in someone's teacup, right? Like it just so seamlessly connects these two identities of JoJo that I don't think any other part does it that well. Like even part 7, I'd say, is not as masterful in interweaving these two aspects of the series. Because if you look back at like part 1, you can already see that Araki always wanted, or seems to have wanted, to merge these two aspects, where you had the sort of super gothic vampire fiction that he was writing in part 1, mixed with the absolute lunacy that was the entire plot, right?
Hmm.
And so I think part 5 is the first and maybe only time that coalescence is almost flawless. So yeah, there you have your money statement, fellas.
There you go.
Okay, now we've gotten the stupid intellectual stuff out of the way. Now we can gas this shit. Dude, King Crimson is the coolest shit.
Yeah, okay. So King Crimson is the absolute coolest fucking thing on the planet, and I don't care if you don't agree with me. I don't
Uh-huh.
give a shit about the meme. I hate the stupid how does it work me? Shut up. Shut up, internet. King Crimson is so fucking raw. The first time he appears, when Bruno's trying to fight him and Bruno's just completely outclassed and just gets obliterated, is
Hmm.
one of the absolute scariest JoJo moments. Like, in part 3 they tried to do it a lot with like Dio,
Hmm.
and like the what's his power, like how, but it was never really that bad. Like, oh, he intimidated Whole Horse, right? Like, whatever. Or in the
Hmm.
very beginning, they all rush out of there because they're like, we have to run because he's gonna get us, and they're like, okay, but like there was nothing scarier in the entire, like, my first time through JoJo than when one of the heroes just got dismantled and
Hmm.
trashed by this dude with like
Hmm.
because of Dio. I assumed ahead of time. Like, I actually didn't know the meme, and I didn't know, like, I didn't even know the first time through that Dio controlled time until out like later.
Hmm.
But like I didn't know any of the silly memes about King Crimson, so I legitimately didn't know what he did. And one of my
Hmm.
favorite things about like figuring that mystery out, was how they used the actual time jump that every other character could see. Because
Hmm.
the way they used Dio's power was that just no one was any the wiser that he did anything, until
Hmm.
something like whatever reaction happens. Like someone would just be standing there and then they'd explode, and they'd be like, "Oh
Hmm.
shit, something happened." But like the fact that you know you would skip up the stairs, when you were walking, or like Polnareff's trick to use the blood droplets, and as soon as you see more
Yeah.
droplets, he's right next to you. It's like that
Mhm.
shit was so cool. It was so cool.
Mhm.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and honestly, to me, one of the things that really tipped King Crimson into like it is legitimately my favorite stand in all of JoJo. And one thing that tipped it to me was and I don't think Araki did a great job of showcasing that in his art, but according to like the canon information that we have, I mean, canon in JoJo, but according to information that we have, King Crimson is like 2.5 meters tall and huge. So to me, the idea of this time skipping, super powerful gorilla was the coolest shit in existence. And I love that in the anime they actually leaned into that, where he's a lot more muscular and not as lean as in the manga. Like, oh my god, it's so cool. And like when you like contrast the Diavolo and King Crimson against like the real life inspirations, which are obviously the songs of the band King Crimson, it gets so much better. Like again, I've made videos on this. I made a whole video analyzing the song references of King Crimson. Go watch it. Give me money. But you know, like there's so much there, and it's something that is just hard to find in other series, and even within JoJo, it's hard to find this sort of mixture of depth and rawness, right? Like it's just deep, deep-seated kinography in a way that is rare, even in JoJo. So yeah, King Crimson is so cool, and I don't give a shit about people who don't understand the power. The anime's out, you have no excuse anymore. Like, come on, it's not that complicated.
No, it's not that hard. It's
Yeah.
just
Also, and I'm gonna say this a few times because I'm a dirty shill. The dub for part 5 is really good. Like, I know you're not hot on the JoJo dubs, but anyone listening who hasn't gone back to watch the dubs, definitely give part 5 a watch because it has some of the best voices in the industry. Like Ray Chase as Bucciarati is heaven.
I
Like,
love Ray Chase so much.
yeah,
My
his
first exposure to
Bucciarati is
him
so
was Final
good.
Fantasy 15. Um,
Hmm.
I absolutely adore that man. He is
Hmm.
Bucciarati. He's Sukuna. He's in a Final Fantasy game. He's slowly working his way through everything that I love, and
Yeah,
I adore that man.
yeah. Like I know him from a very small role that he had for like 2 episodes, no, 1 episode in Attack on Titan. But man, yeah, he's so good, and he is honestly in my mind, he supersedes what's his name, Yuichi Nakamura as Bucciarati. Like when I think Bucciarati in my head, I hear Ray Chase. He is so good, and you have you have so many good voices in it. Giorno is hit or miss in the dub because but that also comes from the fact that his Japanese voice actor Kensho Ono is just so good by
I love
himself.
Kensho Ono as well.
Yeah.
He's Kuroko in
Um
Kuroko's Basketball. For anyone who didn't know that.
uh Junya Inoki, who voices Fugo in part 5, went on to voice Itadori in Jujutsu Kaisen.
Really,
Yeah.
I love that.
Well,
Oh, I think I
well,
knew that.
Abaki.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Jujutsu Kaisen in general has a lot of JoJo voice actors in the Japanese dub. It has Junichi Suwabe, who did Abakio, who then did Sukuna.
Yeah, I can hear that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of overlap, but the English dub is really good. Diavolo's voice actor. Some people don't like him because he leans more into the insanity. He's perfect. In my eyes, that is what Diavolo is supposed to sound like. And yeah, so in general, check out the JoJo dubs, but especially check out JoJo dub Part 5. Also because they hired an Italian advisor so they could pronounce all the Italian properly, which I love.
Oh, that's
Like
really cool.
I was so ready to hear Giorno Giovanna, but no, they go Giorno Giovanna, and it's really good. And
I'm
funny
gonna say
enough,
it the bad way for the rest of my
uh,
life.
hey, look, I kind of grew up watching, well, not grew up, but I watched a lot of like American JoJo tubers before becoming a YouTuber myself. And look, no disrespect to y'all, but the average level of pronunciation when it comes to part 5 is abysmal. Like Diavolo, Razudo, Shorno, come on. Google Translate is right there. They'll tell you.
I
Um,
don't think it's bad.
I
Well, the
mean,
pronunciation's bad, but it never took. I mean, I'm not Italian. Like, well, not nationally, when I don't know the language. So
uh
the uh, the actual pronunciation never got to me. It never took me out of it because I guess I'm not from there for it to have taken it out of me. But like,
Yeah, I mean, to me, like when I was watching the Japanese dub, I didn't really care. It was mostly funny in the way they tried to emulate the Italian. But I am glad because in an English dub, I would have probably minded. Also, because Americans, we Europeans have a contractual obligation to be critical.
that's fair.
It's kind of what we do
We do our
here.
best, and it's not very good.
But yeah, you were gonna say something before I launched into my parade about the dub?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Oh, well, then just say something.
The entirety of it is gas. Like, dude, the whole portion when they decide that they're quitting and leaving the gang, and Narancia jumps in the water and swims after that boat.
Mm.
Fuck me, it's so great. All of it is though. Like, I dare.
Yeah.
There are gonna be people in the comments, and I know there are, who are going to say shit like, "Oh, that sucks though. Actually, part 5 is actually bad," and you all can just get out now because I'm not reading it. I'm not reading it. I'm gonna read a
Yeah.
single criticism about part 5 in the comments, and I'm not gonna read any more of your comments.
Lose carbon privileges the
Comment
moment you
privilege
say
is
something
gone.
bad.
Okay.
uh, yeah, like I also think part 5, like people just call it part 3 Redux, and in a lot of ways it is. It is just a part 3 formula taken to a new level, but it does some pretty cool shit. Like, dude, Doppio versus Risotto. Oh my god.
That's such a good fight. That whole fight's fucking awesome.
Yeah, like it's one of those things where like JoJo's always kind of desperate, right? In the sense of you're always struggling for survival. But part 5 is one of the first ones that really sells that. Like in part 3 it was still very much oh yeah, we would die if we lose, but haha, cool hijinks. Part 5, you just get the two villains meeting each other and just throwing down, vomiting razor blades and like calculating each other's blood oxygen and shit like that. It's so like I know we overuse this word a lot, but it's so raw in the sense
We
of it's
abuse the shit out of that word, but we're never wrong. That's what matters.
yeah. Yeah, it's so good throughout it. And like I also love Diavolo as a villain, even though, he's pretty confusing, but I think that's the point. And like his entire spiel about wanting to be eternally invincible could have easily been very cliche, but because it's contrasted with his insanity, it actually becomes something really engrossing and interesting. And we haven't even talked about the main gang besides Bucciarati yet. Like, I love the entire cast, every single one of them. Like, the fact that Fugo is the earliest one to leave and he's still one of my favorites. Like, how did Araki do this?
Yeah, I don't think that anybody in the main gang is bad. I actually think they're all incredible. They
Mhm.
actually genuinely feel like a close knit family unit. Bucciarati is my favorite one. I mean, he gets the most development, so that's not like super shocking. But like,
Mhm.
it also feels like the first JoJo crew where everybody pulls their own weight.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
always have JoJo crews where you someone is dead weight, right?
Mhm.
Or they get talked up and nothing really happens. Like in part 3, I think Abdul fights Polnareff and then that's it. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's all he does. And then you get the same thing in part 4, like we said before, Okuyasu literally does nothing. Like,
Mhm.
holy shit, he does absolutely nothing. In part 5, nobody is useless. Even if they're not like an active combat member, all of their powers are useful in some way to accomplish what they're trying to do. It's such a good team. It's such a good dynamic, and also, I mean, it's helped by the fact that Giorno is like one of the coolest characters in the franchise.
Mhm. Yeah, like I think the Part 5 gang just kind of has something for everyone. Because you have the loudmouth, goofy characters like Mista and Narancia. You have the cool and collected Abakio. You have Busharaki, which is kind of a mix. And then you have Giorno, who is very much, quiet, sort of unemotive, but very, very interesting if you actually dig into him and like pay attention to how he behaves. Like the moment when he puts Narancia to rest and says no one's ever gonna hurt you again breaks my heart every time because of how Giorno says it and how he looks when he says it. And it's such a tender storyline done with a character that is incredibly subtle for a series that historically has been incredibly loud about everything, right? So I think that's also what makes him kind of special to me. Also, he's Italian, so kinship and all that.
Yeah, exactly. I like the anime adding in the scene where Fugo looks up and sees the plane after
Yeah.
Narancia dies was one of the best, maybe, anime editions I've ever seen in anything.
Okay.
Like, there's something about this entire group that's just perfect, just absolute perfection. All of their death scenes too get treated in like such a special way that a lot of times in JoJo they don't. Like personally, I really like this about Part 3. But when the main
Mm.
cast is going down in Part 3, like you don't have time to mourn them, right? Like shit is going down and you gotta move. Like Kakyoin just got punched through a fucking water tower and Dio's right there and you gotta go.
Mm.
Part 5, everyone kind of has this moment and it's like it's not your stereotypical anime like, oh, he's gonna get his last words to
Mm.
us. It's that, oh shit, he's fucking gone. And like
Yeah.
we have to deal with that, like Abakio's death on the beach, where Narancia is screaming after them that they can't. Why isn't Giorno healing him? And we can't leave him here. And like dealing with the ramifications of that. Like you don't normally, up to that point at least, you didn't really see that in a JoJo
Mm.
death. You got like a few tears, and then some righteous anger. You know, you didn't have those big emotional breakdowns, and then you got that little bit of closure with him where it's like him in the afterlife on the bus stop, like
Mm.
learning that he died and kind of coming to terms with it. And ah, man, I fucking love Part 5.
It's so good.
The
Like,
scene in the end where Bruno finally accepts that he's got to pass on and he can't keep living on borrowed time, so he shatters the little orb for Silver Chariot Requiem so that they can get the
mm.
arrow tip. Ugh.
Yeah. Also, dude, Polnareff coming back is the hypest shit. It's
Yeah,
so
so many people
cool.
shit on that. I don't understand why. I think it's because people just don't like Polnareff. I don't know. I love that.
Yeah, because it's like he comes back this wounded, scarred veteran, and immediately it's like, oh shit, like this is endgame territory. And it's a bit of a shame that he doesn't stick around and just kind of turns into a turtle, as you do in JoJo. Um, but I still love it. And I love that the final fight is less of a fight and more just a chase. And that's the thing people always get wrong about Part 5. They're like, oh, but the final fight between Giorno and Diavolo is so short. It's like, no. The final fight is between everyone versus Chariot Requiem.
Right.
Like,
The
that's the
final
final
fight
fight.
is not Giorno versus Diavolo. That's like the payoff,
Yeah, that's
right?
the epilogue more than
Right.
anything.
That is the final, like that's their reward for winning the final battle. The
Hmm.
final battle is getting the arrow. That's
Hmm.
the actual final battle, and it's so good.
Yeah. Like, I like how in the end, you kind of get the whole shtick again about destiny, which, like, Part 5 is also very big on, right? Like, tempting fate, escaping fate. And how that kind of plays into the end, where the arrow kind of chooses Giorno. It's kind of left up to you whether or not Diavolo drops the arrow because his soul is decaying or because the arrow just does not want him. Um, and it's interesting to have this sort of element show up right at the end. And then, of course, Gold Experience Requiem happens, and my mind explodes trying to understand what it does, besides just knowing that it's Kino as shit.
Gold Experience Requiem is complex, I guess,
Mhm.
because I think I really like it. I like the way that it plays into, the arrow gives you what you need, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's obviously a very big like advancement on what they did with Bites the Dust. And it's pretty clear
Well,
that had he had the idea back then, Bites the Dust would have been classified as whatever you wanted to call it. And the only reason that it's not like a Requiem or whatever is because he didn't have the concept at the time. Because it's the same
yeah.
exact thing. And people will split hairs about that forever. But I love the idea that your stand's evolution is what you need from it. So, like,
Oh man.
you don't like that?
Sorry. No, it's not that I don't like that. That's not a thing. That is a made up interview.
Oh, no, I know.
That
I'm saying that's what I see out of it when I see it.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Okay. Yeah, I
Kira
didn't want to
needed. No,
dash your
I didn't even
dreams
know there
right
was an
here.
interview about that. But
No, no, because for a long time you watch like old explanation videos on JoJo, and a lot of them mention that Requiem stands fulfill your wish, and that was completely made up. There is no basis to that, as
oh,
far
I
as
don't know.
I'm
I've
aware.
never seen that interview. But I'm just talking
Okay.
about between Bites the Dust basically being like, I need my powers to do this thing to help me, and that gives you exactly what you need, to the point that Gold Experience is literally like a hard counter to
Hmm.
King Crimson, because all Giorno is thinking about at the time is, I need to stop this person. That's it.
Hmm.
So this is completely not true, because I'm 99.9% sure that when Chariot accidentally pricks itself with the arrow, it becomes the same Requiem that appears later on. Um,
Hmm.
but I like to think in my own headcanon world that Gold Experience Requiem, for example, would not be the same thing every time.
Okay.
I guess it's also
Interesting.
ambiguous if it's still Requiem permanently or not. I assume that it's not. I don't remember if you see Gold Experience in the Fugo thing.
Uh,
I don't think that you do.
I I don't remember, and I mean the Fugo thing is also like questionable in like how.
Yeah, canonicity, yeah, but
Yeah, exactly.
um, yeah,
But
but I guess
yeah,
it's
you go.
the arrow falls out. So I guess I always took that to mean that it went back to the original Gold Experience when the arrow is separated from him. But it's completely up to that. But I like to think that if he were to use the arrow again, it would not just recreate the same Gold Experience Requiem that it did before. That's
Hmm.
complete headcanon. That's entirely in my brain, but that's what I like to think.
Interesting. Because to me, the whole thing about Requiem was that it's sort of a completion of what your stand is supposed to be, and that's also why like Chariot Requiem is so devastating because it is an incomplete Requiem, right? Because it's not called Silver Chariot Requiem. The manga always calls it Chariot Requiem, and there's
Hmm.
a point to that, right? Because Polnareff dies before the transformation is complete, and Requiem just goes berserk. And I always thought that was a neat thing in general because, of course, the Requiem links back to Mozart and his Requiem that was never completed because yada yada yada. Death commissioned him to write it and then killed him before he could finish it as a fuck you to humanity and all that jazz. So yeah, no, it's really cool if you dig into it. Um, so I always thought that was a really cool thing to tie into stands. And honestly, it's a shame that we've not seen that again. But also, I feel like you kind of need to you kind of need to keep these things special, right? We have seen stand evolutions. Uh, we've seen other stand evolutions later down the line, like with Johnny's Tusk, or now in part 8, Soft and Wet. What is it? Soft and Wet Go Beyond, or whatever it is.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's a super cool concept, and I'm glad that Araki like experimented with the idea of stands changing over time. I guess my biggest problem is just Gold Experience Requiem to me is such a cool power that you could make interesting storylines out of, and it's a shame that it appears and the story is just over. So yeah, that's that, I suppose. Is there anything else on part 5 that you want to mention?
Um, no, I guess not. I mean, yeah, but we don't have time.
Yeah, I mean it's just gonna be a repeat of everything's raw. Like, what do you
Everything's
want us to tell you?
fucking perfect. It's so good. The chocolata thing, the 7-page Muda. Jesus, dude.
Oh, yeah. Also,
Jesus.
fun fact, that was not a 7-page Muda when it first came out in the magazine. In the magazine, it was, I believe, 4 pages, and it got extended in the volume release,
That's
which is the
so
one everyone's
perfect.
familiar with. Yeah,
Ah,
Araki went back and added 2 double spreads into the Muda just for the volume, which
that's
is
the
just
best thing ever. Maybe that's the best news I've ever gotten.
peak Araki.
Peak Araki.
Yeah. All right. Oh, also, Sleeping Slaves is a great arc, and I will not hear any slander.
Yeah, there's a lot of hate for that too, and I don't know why. I think it's cool.
I think, and that's the thing with a lot of Part Five is that it suffered from arguably the worst fan translations out of all the parts. Like obviously, Diamond is Not Crash is more famous,
Oh yeah,
but
the Duang gang.
yeah, but the thing with the Duang scans is like they were so obviously bad, you would read it and not take anything seriously and be like, "Oh yeah, of course, this is wrong." Part Five's original like translation was very insidious in the sense of it was grammatically correct, but it just misrepresented so much of the part and made things unnecessarily confusing. And it just so happens that Part Five includes some of the more confusing aspects of JoJo by themselves. You know, King Crimson, Ghost Experience Requiem, Sleeping Slaves. These are all sort of out there concepts that someone needs to give you a good explanation for. Otherwise, you might be lost. And while I think that the manga and the anime give good explanations for them, if you're reading them through bad translations that themselves don't understand what they're saying, obviously you're not going to really have a good time. And I think a lot of hate for Part 5 still stems from that, which I am justified in saying, especially because a lot of Part 5 hate kind of died down after the anime. But I think that's kind of the fate with all JoJo parts that had bad translations. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, I suppose. You can't really
Yeah.
do anything about what's already done, but I
Yeah,
have no
exactly.
problems with it.
You know, you can't really fault scanlation groups for doing their best or presumably their best because I mean, JoJo still does not have a full English release. Like they haven't even started Part 5 yet, have they?
No.
Yeah, they
Either
just
that or they
finished Part
just did.
4.
One of the two.
Yeah. Which, you know, it's kind of, and also, I hate the fact that the Wiz translations chose to not only erase some of Araki's art for their like ugly text boxes, but also like change the stand names the way the Crunchyroll subs do. Which like, why? You don't censor company names and references in other manga. Why is it JoJo, the one that has so many of them, that needs them all censored? That's the one that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I don't have too
The
much of a thought on it.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I don't know.
it's kind of whatever. Um, so yeah, do we want to move on to the final topic of today?
Yeah, let's go ahead and we'll talk about the the popular kid in the room right now, given the most
Ah,
recent
yes.
announcement.
Uh-huh.
Stone Ocean. What are your thoughts?
Which
Because I have complex feelings about Stone Ocean.
Stone Ocean is weird for me because it is the JoJo arc, the JoJo part by far that I always remember the least of.
Same,
Like
and I think
I
a
have
lot of
read,
that is its own fault.
yeah, like I think it's just it struggles in keeping my attention a lot until the end. Like the ending, I think is perfect, and honestly, if JoJo had ended with part 6, I would not have been disappointed. Like the universal reset is such a beautifully like bittersweet way to end the story. I'm fine with that. I like Jolyne. I like Pucci as a villain. I like that he ties back into Dio. I like how, you know, um, what is it? Over Heaven or just Heaven, like Dio's diary, how that kind of plays into everything. Like I think all that stuff is cool, but the like moment to moment happenings of the arc always elude my memory. And I think it's just because it struggles to keep my attention.
Yeah, I think so. Similar to part 4, a problem I have with part 6 that that hurts my, like, I guess my attention reading it is that there's not a whole lot of like adventure until you get to that certain point where you finally get out of the prison, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it takes an extremely long time to get through the prison for me because I find the prison to be so boring.
Mm-hmm.
So boring. Pretty much as soon as when Jotaro loses his little mind discs,
Mm-hmm.
it really starts to slow down like after the Foo Fighters stuff and like Foo Fighters joins the team. It just kind of becomes ugh, a slog, and you're just like meeting these characters and all of this stuff that's like, I don't care about this. I don't care about Dreaming Dragon. And the thing is, I like a lot of the cast too, like
Mm-hmm.
the lead cast members. I think they're great. But just something about it, like it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't mesh. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That beginning
Yeah.
portion, man, it's tough.
Yeah, I think it's just that also for a story that is centered around Jotaro's daughter, it just doesn't like until the kind of end of the part and until the until Pucci really becomes relevant, the part doesn't really engage with the legacy of JoJo very much, which I know is something Araki is always really hesitant to do because his the whole idea behind the JoJo series, right, is to write something and leave it behind and move on. And I get that, but also when you're committing to finishing the original storyline, like Part 6 does, I kind of wish more of it would explore the past a little more. Like also the fact that, Dio's sons get called and we don't even get a glimpse of Giorno is is weird, right? And the fact that Jotaro
Yes.
is in it, but there's so little about his life and so little about um how he feels about Jolyne, how he feels about his past. Like it's weird. And I think that's something I feel about a lot of JoJo in general, is that it's weird that so little of the past comes up. Like one of the best additions in the Part 5 anime is when they extend the flashbacks of Part 3 Jotaro and Polnareff dealing with the aftermath of the fight against Dio. Like that's cool, not just because it's more stuff to watch, but it's also it kind of brings things closer together. And Part 6 should be the one that does it the most, but it doesn't. And I think that's what really makes it feel more isolated than it is and than it should be to me.
Yeah, it does definitely suffer from like strange isolation when it
Mm-hmm.
feels like it shouldn't. Because again, why does Jotaro have to just be like, I'm busting you out of here? Like, don't you have millions of dollars and like all these external connections that you can use? Like, you don't need to Batman her out of prison. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The whole early portion, like getting her a stand and, oh, I don't have one. Oh, wait, I do have one. I have to learn how to use my Spider Man strings is something like, I don't particularly love Stone Free as a stand. I don't hate
Mm-hmm.
it, but I don't particularly love it. It's just kind of a neutral one for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the problem is I don't really love any protagonist stand in Part 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think Weather Report is cool and Diver Down is pretty cool. And I think after that
Mm-hmm.
it becomes sort of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I don't know. I like all of Pucci's various stands that he
well,
goes
okay,
through.
I was thinking heroes, but yeah, Pucci stands are
Oh
cool.
yeah.
Um, it's just I don't know, man. I can't. I feel like this comes off like I really don't like it, which isn't true because I actually do really like every JoJo part basically. But Part 6 just really struggles for me for a long time to get me to the point where I'm super invested. And a lot of other ones
Mm-hmm.
didn't do that. Like even Part 1, I feel like I can get invested into faster than Part 6. Part 6 feels very sluggish to get to the starting line. Um, the stuff in Part 6 that's good though. Oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
amazing stuff. The whole ending
Mm-hmm.
sequence, the final battle against Pucci, is so good. It's
Yeah, like
absolutely phenomenal.
yeah, in general, like I mentioned earlier in part 5 about like how JoJo dips into this idea of desperate struggles. And the fight against Pucci is like maybe one of the best examples of that. Just like pure devastation. And the fact that Jotaro dies in the way that Oingo and Boingo had predicted back in part three is just mwah, so good.
Oh, I
Just the
know.
cherry on
It's
top.
so good.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah. It's crazy also that like Jotaro's death is not more of a talked about scene because I feel like no one mentions it. People, I know people like usually when like a big important manga character dies in a series, everyone gets spoiled on it, right? But JoJo is so old, and I still know a lot of people that are not aware of the fact that JoJo dies on screen, and has like a pretty tragic death scene.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
it's
pretty
quick,
brutal.
but yeah, like the fact that in his last moments, the man who always moved forward in lieu of like the greater good has to turn around and save his little girl because he just can't go on. Like in this most crucial moment, he betrays his main character trait because he just cares that much. Like it's so beautiful and tragic, and I love it. And it's kind of one of those things where like if you just like half-assedly watch JoJo and don't pay much attention to Jotaro, that moment kind of comes out of nowhere. But if you like pay attention to how he behaves and how he talks to the people around him, especially the people he likes, like it's just such a wonderful way to cap off his journey. And you know, it's also crazy to think that Haraki killed what was pretty much the most popular manga character for the better part of a decade. Like Jotaro was and still is fucking huge.
Oh yeah, I mean people shit on him, but like I don't want to say he made JoJo popular, but part 3 did, and he's the lead of it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the Wolverine of manga in that like decade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, just that's part six to me, right? There's a lot of good stuff in isolation, but tying it all together is where the part kind of struggles with it. You know, final part of the original saga. Very cool idea. Jolyne, first female JoJo, daughter of Jotaro. Very cool idea. An aging Jotaro who comes into the story and caps off his narrative. Very cool idea. Dio's ex-best friend slash lover trying to complete his plan. Very cool idea. But just the connecting glue is not as strong as I would like it to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. It feels like a lot of perfect ideas, but they're just not sewn together as well as I would have liked. And
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's an enjoyable read. It's a fun read through. Like I probably am going to do it again here pretty soon before the anime comes out. But like
Mm-hmm.
it just seems like it's missing something that I feel like a lot of JoJo parts don't, and I can't really put my finger on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's really good, it's firing on all cylinders, just like normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
I expect a JoJo Part 2. But when it's not firing on all cylinders, I'm almost like, why am I here? You know what I mean? Like I feel like I have
Mm-hmm.
less tolerance for Foo Fighters shenanigans than I do like Rohan's, and I don't know why that is. Um, Maybe it's because I
Well,
don't empathize with an algae beast or whatever it is, plankton beast.
well, okay, and this is another one where I might get clipped if the right people are watching this. Araki has a tendency that shows itself once in a while, which is where he feels like he needs to justify the bizarre part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure title, where he just shoves in weird shit for the sake of it. He does that a few times in part four. He does it not so much in part five, mostly because it's so fast paced. Like the piss drinking scene, you could argue is doesn't really serve any purpose other than being weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like yada 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 characterizes the gang, but you know you could have done it otherwise. But I think part six and part eight are the ones where Araki does it the most, and they suffer because of it. There's so much in part six, especially relating to some of the characters and some of the stands, where it's just like this is almost going too far. Like the green baby is a cool idea, but the
I
entire
hate the green baby. The whole part about the
okay,
green baby.
there we go, right? Like it's so it gets to a point where it's somewhat obnoxious. Like Foo Fighters, an algae that turns into like a hot lady that follows them. Like, hey, cool that we have an almost all women cast. That's cool, but it's kind of it's weird because to complain about something being bizarre in JoJo sounds stupid. But there's a point at which you feel like it's just there to justify the title, and that's kind of where my eyes glaze over, right? Like Hermes, when she mentions that she had her breasts
I
surgically
was
altered
just
so she
about to
could,
say that.
yeah, yeah,
Where
that
she
she can
has the
hide
money
things.
pocket.
Yeah, like that's I feel on one hand that's so funny, but on the other hand I feel like that kind of does nothing for her and the story. Like,
Yeah, it
oh,
doesn't
okay.
characterize anything really. It's just like, oh,
I mean,
that's a funky thing.
it kind of does characterize her, I guess. Like,
A
oh, she's
little.
resourceful and weird, but you can do that in other ways, right? Like, that's the thing. You could always do it in other ways, and you can say that with anything. But in part six and part eight, again, I think they're the most common instances of something being weird for the sake of being weird. When I think JoJo's charm comes from being weird in service of its grander story. So yeah, Giorno turns everything into frogs. That is bizarre, but it's part of his ability, and he uses it in really clever ways, and it characterizes him not just as someone who's smart, but someone who understands the value of life, as he is sort of an arbiter of it, or of a fake version of life. So, it's there is a fine line to be threaded, and I think this is one of those things where like it depends from person to person, right? But for me, part six doesn't manage to ride that line.
I think I could see that. Like, there's just a lot of stuff in part six, and I think a mix of it is a weaker supporting cast a little bit. Like, I'm not big on Hermes either. I really like
Mm-hmm.
Jolyne. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Not huge on Hermes. Not huge on the Foo Fighters. Not huge on Emporio. I think he's okay. I like him at the end, but a lot of the time I'm like, what are you doing here, little child,
Mm-hmm.
little boy? Um, I like Anasui and Weather Report, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like when other JoJo parts want to do silly things with their cast, they can, and it feels a lot like part six is really, really heavy carried by Jolyne being awesome. Because like I
Yeah.
really like her. It's sort of the Josuke effect, even worse, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
in part four, I feel like Josuke carries a lot of the cool moments, but when it comes to the
Uh-huh.
party moments, like the group hanging out, everyone kind of chips in, right? Like Josuke is the
Mm-hmm.
cool fighter, but everyone else can kind of do their own thing. Part six, it feels like maybe every single bit of it is Jolyne. Like the good comedy is usually Jolyne. The cool
Mm-hmm.
moments, usually Jolyne. Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels very hard carried by her. And that's not the worst
Mm-hmm.
thing ever because like part two is hard carried by Joseph big time, and I really like part two. But it
Mm-hmm.
sort of feels like JoJo had moved beyond that point. It feels like a big regression, I guess, coming from the gang and then going
Yeah.
to Jolyne and her not that amazing friends.
Yeah. Like Jolene for me is one of those characters that I love her in concept and I love that she exists, but in the moment to moment, even she is not as immediately charismatic as some of the other JoJos. She does have some really cool moments, like her and by extension Araki spoiling The Sixth Sense for the Japanese audiences a month before it came out in theaters is one of my favorite like JoJo trivia things.
That's
It's
so
so
funny to me.
funny.
It's so fucking
Yeah.
funny to me.
It he was like, yeah, fuck you if you were looking forward to this movie. um, and in general, I like certain aspects of the gang. Like I like that Weather Report is the brother of the main villain. Like these are cool ideas. Again, it's cool ideas that sound really awesome when you hear them in isolation, but then you go and read it and it's just not as strong as I think it should be. And that's how I feel also about Jolene. Like she isn't as strong of a main character as I would hope the first female JoJo to be. It just kind of feels like a letdown. Like I
That's
feel like the
fair.
times when she's at her best is when she's emulating Jotaro. Like when she's being a badass. Aside from that, her goofy moments are very hit or miss for me. Some of them are just kind of weird, like that whole thing at the start where she's naked and she's like, "Oh, shall I roll over?" It's like, uh, Araki, please."
I don't hate it. I think her comedy tends to hit more than it misses for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think the only joke that I didn't love was like the "they caught me masturbating" joke, but that was also because like I didn't know the character yet, really. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
really, you're gonna make that joke right away? But like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I tend to like her. I tend to
Mm-hmm.
think that most of her jokes are funny, and I think that her action moments are really good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she definitely has some of the cooler, badass moments, and I think part of that is her stand feels relatively weak in comparison to a lot of lead characters.
Mm-hmm.
So the cooler things that she does seem to hit a lot harder to me, at least, sort of in like a more well executed version of that kid from Vigilantes who's like, my power sucks. Oh no, it doesn't. Like, you know
I
what I mean?
suppose. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, okay, I do get that.
yeah.
Um, okay, one guy we have kind of not talked about much so far that I want to mention is obviously Pucci, because I actually really like Pucci
Pucci's
as
kind
a
of the goat of
concept.
part six.
Yeah, as a concept and as a like as an actual execution, he's just so interesting to follow. Like, because again, I think I mentioned it before. JoJo is really cool when it dips into its own legacy because it doesn't do it very often. And Pucci is just basically the leftovers of the Dio plan. And that's so cool to me. Like it really gives it this sense of cohesion. And Pucci's feelings and ideas and memories regarding Dio also just flesh it out so wonderfully. So yeah, I am super excited, especially to see him animated. Because some of those sequences where he like unlocks Made in Heaven and shit are hopefully in animation gonna be fucking incredible.
It better be. I mean, you know
Yeah.
what? It will be. What a pointless statement. Of course it will. Man, King Crimson was done so well. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I mean sure. I'm sure it will be. But part six is weird, like the anime, because like they have had like three announcements and we've seen nothing. Like they've just continuously announced more announcements that
Yeah.
then themselves have announced more announcements.
Yeah. They always kind of do that. I don't really understand the cat and mouse game that the anime. What is it? David Productions. I
Yeah.
don't really understand the. We don't know if we're gonna make another one. We might if people want it. Shut up, man. You know how much money
Yeah.
JoJo makes you now?
Yeah, like the only one that I am actually kind of on the fence on is part seven and onwards, because
Well, because it's
part
the
six
the
is
shift up to yeah.
yeah, because it's part six ends the main storyline. By the time they have finished animating part six, David Pro will have been doing JoJo for 10 years, which very few studios want to stay with the same project for 10 years. Um, the JoJo productions have always been incredibly messy behind the scenes. Part five part five kind of recovered. Part four basically almost didn't scrape by. Um, and then part seven obviously includes horse races and vast American vistas, which are difficult to do on a TV budget. So, we'll have to see. Doesn't help also that a lot of like, when you go back to like old interviews with the committee and the animation team, they're very open about like, oh yeah, I can't wait to get to part six. I can't wait to get to part four. No one mentions part seven. Like straight up, part seven, they almost pretend it doesn't exist, aside from like some fringe instances. And of course, the first opening of the JoJo anime includes stuff up until part six, I believe. So, we'll have to see, right? Like part six is happening. We have the confirmation. Everything's good. But part seven is the one kind of on the fence. And honestly, like if it doesn't get an anime, I'm not going to be too sad because the manga is perfectly fine the way it is. I don't necessarily need it animated.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously prefer manga to anime, so I tend to
Mm-hmm.
always gravitate to that first. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I would like to see it still. I basically the way I am with the manga and anime is if I like a manga, I want to see it animated, but I'm not gonna watch
Mm-hmm.
an anime first and then roll back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. No. I know. I get that. I get that. Um. Okay. Is there anything else we want to talk about part six? Because I'm kind of out of things that I think about when I think about part six.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything nice to say left, which sounds shitty. Again, I don't mean for it to. Um, because I do like it. I feel like I did nothing but shit on it the whole time. I do enjoy it, but I think it's just hard for me to articulate what I do like about it, and it's really easy for me to articulate what I don't like about it.
Well, I think basically, if I had to sum it up for myself, it's that part six is a perfectly enjoyable, serviceable part of JoJo with some cool ideas that are not executed as well as they could be. But as the final part of the original timeline, I feel like it falls short because it's only that, you know? Like, it has a lot of the things that make previous parts great, but I would hope that at this point, by the sixth part, there'd be a bit more, you know? So I think that's the way I could kind of sum it up for myself.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I don't know. Part six is a weird one for me because again, it's the one that like the least jumps into my head immediately about of
Yeah,
all of them, of
yeah.
all eight. Even
Mhm.
part eight, which I struggle to remember too. I think part six has the least like big hit moments for me. But it's fun and I enjoy it, and its cool moments are really cool, and it has fun stuff in it. But just something about it like makes it very hit or miss for me in a lot of places.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I feel like I'm just going to repeat that over and over again if I keep trying to articulate it. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a good point to to sign off, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So
Let us know in the comments what you guys think about the JoJo Arrow
yeah.
Saga, unless it is criticism of Part 5. Keep that shit to yourself.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next week for a regularly scheduled episode.
I think so. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another special episode. Sorry we never make these, but, the magazine comes out every week.
Yeah, and we like have lives. Like if I don't watch it, the house will randomly catch on fire. That's what it's like being an adult.
Also true.
Yeah. You know, when my parents used to say, when it's not one thing, it's always another, I thought, what the heck does that mean? Now I understand.
Yep. And boy, does it suck. I
Yeah,
missed
well,
recording another show with another person on Thursday because I
yeah.
literally just was like, finally a night where I don't have to do adult things. And I was like, oh no!
Aw.
I know, I feel so bad. I completely forgot.
Uh-huh. Ah, that sucks. But yeah, uh, I actually don't have, because it's on your channel, I don't have access to our analytics for this show, but like, I'm assuming most of the people who watch us are like in their teens.
I've never checked. Probably.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, this is what you got to look forward to. You're always tired and you never have the time to do the things you like. It's great.
Yeah.
It's just great.
All
Um, so yeah, I guess see you around.
right, everybody. Bye.
Bye.